In the year 2247, Earth was no longer the vibrant blue and green jewel it once had been. Centuries of pollution, endless wars over dwindling resources, and unchecked greed had left the planet a shadow of its former self. The oceans were choked with plastic, the forests reduced to ash, and the skies perpetually gray with smog. Humanity teetered on the edge of collapse, clinging to hope like a drowning man clutches at driftwood. And then, as if out of nowhere, came an offer too good to refuse. The Interstellar Council, a coalition of advanced alien species that governed much of the galaxy, announced their intention to help humanity. They claimed they had watched Earth's struggles for decades and decided it was time to intervene. Their proposal was simple yet astonishing. They would relocate humans to a pristine new world called Elysium Prime. There, humanity could start, anew, free from the mistakes of the past, under the guidance of the Council's superior technology. Ethan Cole sat in his small apartment in New Chicago, staring at the flickering screen mounted on the wall. His hands were streaked with grease, from another long day repairing broken machinery in the city's crumbling industrial zone. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet, except for the occasional rumble of distant explosions. He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as he listened to the Council's ambassador speak through the broadcast. "This is our chance," the alien said, its voice smooth and calm. "A fresh beginning for your species." Beside him, Lily rocked Ava, their 5-year-old daughter, gently in her arms. She looked tired but hopeful, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Do you think it's true?" she asked softly. "Do you think they'll really save us?" Ethan hesitated before answering. He wanted to believe it. He truly did. But something about the whole situation felt off. For one thing, why now? Why had the Council waited until Earth was on the verge of total ruin to step in? And what exactly did they mean by relocation? Would everyone get to go, or just a select few? Ethan didn't trust easy answers, especially not when they came wrapped in promises of salvation. "Let's wait and see," he finally replied, forcing a reassuring smile. "We'll figure it out together." But deep down, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. That night, unable to sleep, he slipped out of bed and headed to an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was a place he'd heard whispers about, a secret meeting spot for those who doubted the Council's intentions. Inside, he found a group of people gathered around a dimly lit table. Among them was Rachel Grant, a journalist known for her relentless pursuit of the truth. Her sharp features and piercing gaze made her seem older than she actually was. "You're late," Rachel said without looking up as Ethan entered. She gestured for him to sit. "I assume you've heard the rumors?" Ethan nodded, pulling up a chair. "About how they're only taking certain people?" "Yeah, I've heard them." Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. "It's worse than that. I've been digging into their plans, and it looks like they don't intend to save everyone. Only a fraction of the population will be chosen, mostly politicians, corporate executives, and anyone else with enough money to buy their way onto the ships. Everyone else. Well, let's just say Earth won't be habitable much longer after the Exodus." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. How could the Council abandon billions of innocent people? Was this really all about saving humanity, or was it just another power grab? Before he could respond, a young man named Daniel Hayes spoke up. "If that's true, we need to warn people. We can't let them march blindly into this trap." Rachel shook her head. "And how do you suggest we do that? The Council controls every major news outlet. Anyone who tries to speak out will disappear before they even finish their sentence." Ethan frowned, thinking hard. There had to be a way to expose the truth. If nothing else, he owed it to Lily and Ava to try. As the meeting broke up, Rachel handed him a data chip. "Take this," she said. "It's everything I've uncovered so far. Maybe you can find something useful." Back at home, Ethan plugged the chip into his computer and began sifting through the files. What he found chilled him to the bone. Detailed plans outlined which cities would be prioritized for evacuation and which ones would be left behind. Lists of names categorized individuals based on wealth, influence, and perceived value to the council. Worst of all, there were memos discussing the sterilization of Earth after the Exodus, ensuring that no remnants of human civilization remained. Ethan knew he couldn't keep this information to himself. The next morning, he went straight to Marcus Lane, a high-ranking official overseeing the evacuation efforts in New Chicago. Lane was a tall, imposing man with a perpetual scowl etched onto his face. When Ethan confronted him, demanding answers, Lane didn't bother denying the allegations. Instead, he smirked, clearly amused by Ethan's outrage. "You think we owe you anything, Cole?" Lane sneered. "Humanity brought this on yourselves. The Council is doing you a favor by offering even a handful of survivors a second chance." Ethan's blood boiled, but he forced himself to stay calm. "And what about the rest? Are they supposed to just die because they weren't rich enough or important enough for your precious list?" Lane shrugged. "Survival of the fittest. It's the natural order of things." Furious, Ethan stormed out of the office, his mind racing. He couldn't rely on the system to fix itself, not when it was corrupt to its core. If he wanted to protect his family and others like them, he'd have to take matters into his own hands. That evening, Ethan shared what he'd learned with Lily. At first, she refused to believe him, clinging to the hope that the Council's promises were genuine. But as he showed her the evidence, her expression darkened. "What are we going to do?" she whispered, clutching Ava tightly. "We fight," Ethan said firmly. "We expose the truth and make sure as many people as possible know what's really happening." Lily hesitated, fear warring with determination in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but we have to be careful. If they catch us—" "They won't," Ethan interrupted, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it himself. "We'll find a way." Over the next few weeks, Ethan worked tirelessly alongside Rachel and a growing network of allies. They spread flyers, hacked, public broadcasts, and organized protests wherever possible. Resistance movements sprang up across the globe, united by a shared sense of betrayal and desperation. Yet despite their efforts, the Council's propaganda machine proved nearly impossible to counteract. Many still clung to the belief that salvation awaited them aboard the starships. As the day of departure approached, tension reached a fever pitch. Families argued, friends turned against each other, and riots erupted in cities worldwide. Ethan, Lily, and Ava managed to secure passage thanks to forged documents provided by Rachel, who risked her life smuggling them aboard one of the ships. But even as they boarded, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Standing on the observation deck, watching Earth shrink into the distance, Ethan felt a pang of sorrow mixed with resolve. No matter what happened, next, he vowed to fight for a future where humanity wasn't defined by the whims of those who sought to control it. The day of departure arrived with a mixture of chaos and eerie calm. The skies above Earth were filled with the hum of massive starships descending from orbit, their sleek metallic hulls glowing faintly in the dim light. These vessels, towering, like ancient monoliths, represented humanity's last hope, or so most believed. Crowds gathered at designated ports, clutching meager belongings and holding on to loved ones as they waited to board. For many, it was the first time they had seen such advanced technology up close. But for Ethan Cole, standing among the throngs of hopeful refugees, the sight of the ships only deepened his unease. Ethan, Lily, and their daughter Ava had secured passage thanks to forged documents provided by Rachel Grant. The process hadn't been easy. They'd spent days hiding in abandoned buildings, evading patrols sent to round up those deemed unworthy of relocation. When they finally reached the port, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that they'd made it this far, but dread because he knew the Council's promises were hollow. Still, there was no turning back now. Earth was dying, and these ships were the only way out. As they boarded, Ethan noticed the stark differences between the passengers. Some wore expensive suits or elegant dresses, clearly part of the elite chosen for relocation. Others, like himself, looked ragged and worn, their faces etched with exhaustion. The ship's interior reflected this divide. While the wealthy enjoyed spacious cabins outfitted with luxurious amenities, ordinary refugees were herded into cramped quarters with little privacy. Ethan couldn't help but feel anger bubbling inside him as he guided Lily and Ava to their assigned space, a small compartment barely large enough to fit a cot. Lily tried to remain optimistic, pointing out that at least they were safe for now. "We'll be okay," she said softly, brushing Ava's hair back as the little girl curled up on the cot. "This is just temporary." But Ethan wasn't convinced. Something about the entire setup felt wrong. The alien crew members moved silently through the corridors, their expressions unreadable behind smooth, featureless masks. There were no human overseers, no signs of cooperation between species. Instead, the humans aboard seemed more like cargo than passengers. Every interaction reinforced the idea that the Council viewed humanity as expendable. Determined to uncover more, Ethan began exploring the ship during the limited hours when movement was permitted. He struck up conversations with other passengers, piecing together fragments of information. One man, Daniel Hayes, claimed to have overheard a conversation between two alien officers. According to Daniel, the Council planned to sterilize Earth after the Exodus, not just to cleanse the planet of pollution, but to erase all traces of human existence. "They don't want us coming back," Daniel whispered urgently. "Once we're gone, they're going to wipe everything clean." Ethan's stomach churned at the thought. If what Daniel said was true, then billions left behind wouldn't just die. They'd be erased entirely, as if humanity had never existed. He needed proof, something concrete he could share with others. That's when he remembered the data chip Rachel had given him before they parted ways. Hidden carefully. In his jacket, it contained encrypted files detailing the Council's plans. Maybe there was more on it than he'd initially realized. That night, while Lily and Ava slept, Ethan retrieved the chip and connected it to a portable device he'd scavenged earlier. As the screen lit up, rows of classified documents appeared before him. His heart raced as he scrolled through reports outlining the logistics of Earth's sterilization. The Council referred to it as Operation Cleansing, a euphemism for genocide. Worse still, the files hinted at experiments conducted on previous civilizations relocated by the Council. Entire populations had been subjected to genetic modifications, stripped of their autonomy, and turned into obedient workers. Ethan's hands trembled as he absorbed the information. This wasn't just betrayal, it was systematic erasure. Humanity wasn't being saved. It was being dismantled piece by piece. He knew he couldn't keep this knowledge to himself. The next morning, he sought out Rachel, who had managed to secure passage on the same ship. She listened intently as Ethan explained what he'd discovered, her face growing pale with each revelation. "We have to tell people," Rachel said, firmly. "If we can get this information out, maybe we can stop them." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure how they'd pull it off. The ship's communication systems were tightly controlled, and any attempt to broadcast unauthorized messages would likely result in immediate punishment. Still, they didn't have a choice. If they stayed silent, the Council's plans would succeed without resistance. Together, Ethan and Rachel devised a plan. Using parts scavenged from maintenance areas, they built a makeshift transmitter capable of bypassing the ship's security protocols. It was risky. Any misstep could alert the alien crew, but they had to try. Late one night, while most passengers slept, they activated the device and began transmitting the files to every available channel. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Murmurs spread throughout the ship. Passengers woke up, confused and alarmed as the truth unfolded. Arguments broke out in the corridors, some demanding answers from the alien crew, others insisting it was all a hoax. Panic set in as reality sank in. The Council had lied to them. Earth wasn't being saved, it was being destroyed. The reaction was swift and brutal. Within hours, armed guards swept through the ship, rounding up anyone suspected of involvement in the leak. Refugees were confined to their quarters, and martial law was declared. Ethan and Rachel barely escaped capture, hiding in a ventilation shaft as the aliens searched below. Their hearts pounded as footsteps echoed nearby, but eventually, the patrol moved on. Back in their compartment, Lily confronted Ethan, tears streaming down her face. "What have you done?" she demanded. "Do you realize what this means? They're going to kill us." "I had to do something," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "I couldn't let them get away with this." "But what about Ava?" Lily cried, gesturing toward their sleeping daughter. "What about her future?" Ethan hesitated, guilt weighing heavily on his shoulders. He wanted to reassure Lily, to promise her that everything would work out, but he couldn't. All he could offer was determination. "I'm doing this for her," he said quietly. "For her and everyone else who deserves better than what the Council has planned." Lily didn't respond. She simply turned away, hugging Ava closer as silent sobs shook her body. Ethan wished he could comfort her, but he knew there was no easy solution. The lines had been drawn, and they were running out of time. Meanwhile, tensions aboard the ship continued to escalate. Groups of refugees began organizing themselves, forming makeshift councils to discuss their options. Some argued for peaceful negotiation, hoping to appeal to the Council's sense of morality. Others, emboldened by anger and desperation, called for open rebellion. Ethan found himself caught in the middle, torn between his desire to protect his family and his need to fight back against the injustice. One evening, as Ethan attended a clandestine meeting in an unused storage bay, he met Sarah Blake, a former soldier turned medic. Her sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor immediately commanded respect. "If we're going to survive this," she said, addressing the group, "we need to take control of our fate. Sitting around waiting for someone else to save us isn't going to cut it." Her words resonated with Ethan. He realized that survival wouldn't come from passivity. It would require action. Together with Sarah, Daniel, and a handful of others, he began laying the groundwork for a daring operation, seizing control of the ship's navigation systems and rerouting it away from Elysium Prime. It was a long shot, fraught with danger. But as Ethan looked around at the faces of his fellow passengers, he saw determination in their eyes. They weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for the chance to reclaim their humanity. And for the first time since the Exodus began, Ethan allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. The journey ahead would be perilous, and the odds were stacked against them. But as long as they stood together, there was still a chance. For justice, for freedom, and for a future worth fighting for. The tension aboard the ship grew thicker with each passing day. Refugees whispered in hushed tones, exchanging updates on the latest developments. Some believed that resistance was futile, arguing that fighting back would only make things worse. Others, inspired by Ethan's defiance, joined the growing movement determined to take a stand. The divide between those who wanted peace and those ready for rebellion deepened, creating an atmosphere of mistrust and fear. Ethan found himself at the center of it all. Every decision he made carried weight. Every plan he proposed scrutinized by those looking to him for leadership. It wasn't a role he had asked for, but he accepted it because someone had to step up. With Sarah Blake by his side, he worked tirelessly to organize the scattered groups of dissidents into a cohesive force. Daniel Hayes proved invaluable as well, using his knowledge of the ship's layout to map out potential weak points in the alien crew's defenses. Together, they began preparing for what they knew would be a dangerous confrontation. Lily watched from the sidelines, torn between her love for Ethan and her fear for their daughter's safety. She couldn't deny the righteousness of his cause, but she also couldn't ignore the risks. Each night, as Ava slept beside her, Lily wrestled with doubts. What if they failed? What if their actions led to even greater suffering? She tried to voice her concerns to Ethan, but he seemed too focused on the mission to listen fully. "You're putting us all in danger," she said one evening, her voice trembling. "What happens if they catch you?" "They won't," Ethan replied firmly, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "We don't have another choice, Lily. If we do nothing, we're handing ourselves over to whatever fate the Council has planned for us." "But Ava," Lily started, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ava deserves a future where she isn't controlled or erased," Ethan interrupted gently. "This is about giving her and everyone else a real chance." Though his words made sense, they did little to ease Lily's anxiety. She felt powerless, caught between two impossible paths. Still, she resolved to support Ethan in whatever way she could, even if it meant swallowing her fears. As the days passed, the group finalized their plans. Their goal was clear: seize control of the ship's navigation systems and reroute it away from Elysium Prime. To do this, they needed access to the command center, a heavily guarded area located near the heart of the vessel. Breaking in wouldn't be easy, but they hoped that surprise and sheer determination would give them the edge they needed. The operation began late one night, under the cover of darkness. Ethan, Sarah, and a small team of volunteers crept through the dimly lit corridors, sticking to shadows to avoid detection. Daniel acted as their guide, leading them along less traveled routes to minimize the risk of running into patrols. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the ship's metal frame making them flinch. When they reached the entrance to the command center, they encountered their first obstacle: two alien guards stationed outside the door. Sarah motioned for silence, signaling Ethan and another volunteer named Marcus to approach from opposite sides. Moving with practiced precision, they managed to incapacitate the guards without raising the alarm. Breathing heavily, they dragged the unconscious bodies into a nearby storage closet and sealed the door behind them. Inside the command center, the room hummed with activity. Alien technicians worked at consoles, their movements precise and mechanical. Ethan's team split up, some heading for the main terminal while others kept watch near the exits. Ethan took a deep breath and approached the central console, his fingers hovering over the controls. He had studied the interface beforehand, thanks to diagrams provided by Rachel, but seeing it in person was still daunting. "Hurry," Sarah whispered urgently from her position near the doorway. "We don't have much time." Ethan nodded, forcing himself to focus. His hands moved quickly across the panel, entering commands to override the ship's autopilot. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights flashing throughout the room. One of the technicians turned toward them, its mask-like face devoid of emotion. "Intruders detected," it announced in a cold, monotone voice. "Security protocols activated." Panic surged through Ethan, but he didn't stop. He continued, working, sweat dripping down his forehead as he input the final sequence. Behind him, Sarah and Marcus engaged the incoming guards, their makeshift weapons clashing against advanced technology. Sparks flew as energy blasts ricocheted off the walls, filling the room with smoke and noise. Finally, with a triumphant shout, Ethan completed the override. The ship shuddered slightly as its course shifted, veering away from Elysium Prime. For a brief moment, relief washed over him. They had done it. They had taken control. But the victory was short-lived. Reinforcements arrived moments later, overwhelming the small team. Ethan and the others were forced to retreat, retreating back into the labyrinthine corridors of the ship. As they regrouped in a hidden alcove, injuries and exhaustion evident on their faces, Ethan realized the battle was far from over. Taking the command center had been just the first step. Holding it would require more strength than they currently possessed. Back in their compartment, Lily waited anxiously for news. When Ethan finally returned, covered in dirt and bruises, she rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay?" she asked, clutching his arm. "I'm fine," Ethan assured her, though his voice betrayed his fatigue. "We changed the ship's course, but they'll come after us soon. We need to prepare for what's next." Lily nodded, steeling herself. Whatever happened now, she knew they were in it together. Despite her fears, she felt a spark of resolve ignite within her. They had fought for their freedom once. They could do it again. Meanwhile, rumors of the rebellion spread throughout the fleet. On other ships, similar acts of defiance began to emerge. Passengers refused to follow orders, demanding answers from their alien captors. The Council's grip on humanity was starting to slip, and cracks were forming in their carefully constructed facade. Unbeknownst to anyone, however, the Council had anticipated resistance. Hidden within the fabric of the ships themselves were fail-safes designed to maintain order no matter the cost. These mechanisms weren't just physical, they manipulated reality itself, bending time and space to ensure compliance. As the rebellion gained momentum, strange phenomena began to occur. Time seemed to warp unpredictably. Corridors shifted without warning, doors leading to places they shouldn't. Passengers reported seeing visions, alternate versions of themselves living different lives, making different choices. Conversations became disjointed, memories unreliable. Fear spread like wildfire as people struggled to distinguish truth from illusion. Ethan noticed these changes during one of his patrols. A hallway he had walked down countless times suddenly ended in a dead wall. Confused, he turned back, only to find himself in a completely different part of the ship. Panic gripped him briefly before he forced himself to stay calm. Something was wrong, not just with the ship, but with reality itself. Rachel, who had been monitoring the situation closely, approached Ethan with grave news. "It's the Council," she explained. "They're tampering with the multiverse. By severing Earth's connection to the cosmic web, they've destabilized everything. This chaos is just the beginning." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. If the Council was capable of such manipulation, then humanity's struggle went beyond mere survival. It was about preserving the very essence of existence. He knew they couldn't fight this alone. They needed help, not just from each other, but from forces beyond their understanding. Determined to push forward, Ethan called a meeting with his closest allies. Together, they devised a new plan. Locate the source of the Council's power and destroy it. Using stolen data, Sarah identified a central hub located near Elysium Prime, a nexus point where the Council maintained control over reality. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. As preparations began for the assault on the Nexus, tensions aboard the ship reached a boiling point. The Council offered amnesty to anyone willing to betray the rebels. Promises of safety and privilege tempted many, including some within Ethan's own ranks. Trust became a rare commodity, and paranoia set in. One fateful night, Lily faced her greatest test yet. The Council approached her privately, offering protection for her and Ava in exchange for information about Ethan's plans. Torn between her loyalty to her husband and her desire to shield her daughter, Lily agonized over the decision. In the end, she chose what she believed was best for Ava, but the cost of that choice weighed heavily on her soul. Unaware of Lily's betrayal, Ethan pressed onward, driven by the belief that humanity deserved better than extinction or enslavement. With his team by his side, he prepared for the final battle, a fight not just for survival, but for the right to exist on their own terms. The journey ahead promised unimaginable challenges, but Ethan refused to give up. For Ava, for Lily, and For everyone counting on him, he vowed to see it through to the end. Whatever lay beyond the horizon, they would face it together, or not at all. The battle for the Nexus was unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. It wasn't just a fight against physical enemies, it was a war against the very fabric of reality itself. As the fleet approached the central hub near Elysium Prime, strange phenomena intensified. Time seemed to stretch and compress unpredictably. Corridors twisted into impossible shapes, and familiar faces began to blur, replaced by distorted reflections of people who might have been but never were. The chaos made it nearly impossible to coordinate their efforts, yet Ethan pressed on, driven by desperation and determination. Ethan, Sarah, Daniel, and a small group of rebels launched their assault on the Nexus in stolen shuttlecrafts, breaking away from the main fleet. The journey to the hub was harrowing. Alien fighters pursued them relentlessly, their sleek ships cutting through space like knives. Explosions lit up the void as missiles streaked past, narrowly missing their tiny vessels. Inside the shuttle, Ethan gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white with tension. Ava's face flashed in his mind, a reminder of why he couldn't afford to fail. When they finally reached the Nexus, it loomed before them like a colossal machine pulsating with energy. Its surface shimmered with shifting colors, as if alive, feeding on the fragments of broken realities scattered across the multiverse. This was the source of the Council's power, the heart of their control over existence. Destroying it wouldn't be easy. Layers of defenses surrounded the structure, including automated drones and energy barriers that crackled with lethal force. "We'll only get one shot at this," Ethan said, addressing his team over the comms. "System. Stick to the plan and don't stop until we're inside." The shuttles split up, each targeting a different section of the defenses. Ethan's craft led the charge, drawing fire from the drones while Sarah's team worked to disable the outer barrier. The air was thick with tension as they navigated through waves of attacks. One of the shuttles exploded mid-flight, sending debris spiraling into the void. Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. There was no room for grief. Not now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the barrier flickered and collapsed. The remaining shuttles surged forward, landing on a platform jutting out from the Nexus. Ethan and his team disembarked, weapons drawn, ready for whatever awaited them inside. The entrance yawned open like a mouth, dark and foreboding. They stepped cautiously into the structure, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Inside, the environment shifted constantly. Walls melted and reformed, corridors stretched impossibly long, and gravity seemed to fluctuate without warning. Ethan's head spun as he tried to make sense of the disorienting surroundings. His teammates struggled too, some falling to their knees as the instability overwhelmed them. But they couldn't afford to stop. Every second counted. As they ventured deeper, they encountered alien guardians, towering figures clad in armor that shimmered like liquid metal. These beings moved with unnatural speed and precision, their weapons firing bursts of energy that warped time itself. The rebels fought back fiercely, relying on teamwork and sheer willpower to hold their ground. Daniel took out 2 guardians with a well-placed explosive, while Sarah used her medical skills to patch up wounded comrades on the fly. Despite their best efforts, casualties mounted and fear gnawed at even the bravest hearts. Ethan pushed forward, his resolve unwavering. He knew the cost of failure would be catastrophic, not just for humanity, but for all of reality. If the Nexus remained intact, the Council's manipulation would continue unchecked, erasing entire timelines and rewriting history at their whim. He couldn't let that happen. At last, they reached the core chamber. In the center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure glowing with an otherworldly light. Streams of fragmented reality swirled around it, trapped like insects in amber. Ethan recognized them instantly, pieces of lives erased, moments snatched away, entire civilizations reduced to echoes. The sight filled him with rage and sorrow, fueling his determination to end the Council's tyranny once and for all. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice trembling with awe and dread. "If we destroy this, we can stop them." But before they could act, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Marcus Lane, the same official Ethan had confronted back on Earth. Now, however, Lane looked different, his body augmented with alien technology, his eyes glowing with cold, mechanical light. He smirked as he approached, his voice devoid of any trace of humanity. "You've caused quite a mess, Cole," Lane sneered. "Did you really think you could win against something so far beyond your comprehension?" Ethan raised his weapon, aiming it squarely at Lane. "I'm not fighting alone," he replied. "And I'm not afraid of you, or them." Lane chuckled, raising a hand. Energy crackled around his fingers, distorting the air. "Brave words. Let's see how brave you are when I tear apart everything you hold dear." With that, Lane unleashed a wave of energy that sent Ethan and his team sprawling. The rebels scrambled to their feet, returning fire, but Lane's enhancements made him nearly invincible. Blasts ricocheted harmlessly off his armored form, and every step he took radiated raw power. The battle raged on, desperate and chaotic, as Ethan and his companions fought for their lives. Amidst the chaos, Lily appeared. She had betrayed Ethan earlier, revealing his plans to the Council in exchange for protection for Ava. Now she stood, frozen in the doorway, her expression torn between guilt and horror. Her betrayal had allowed Lane to anticipate their moves, putting everyone in greater danger. For a moment, Ethan locked eyes with her, his heart breaking at the sight of her. "Anguish, Lily," he whispered, unable to say more. "I'm sorry," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was saving her." Before she could finish, Lane turned his attention to her, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Your usefulness has ended," he declared coldly, raising a hand to strike her down. "No!" Ethan shouted, lunging. "Forward." With a burst of adrenaline, he tackled Lane, knocking him off balance. The two men grappled, trading blows as the core chamber trembled around them. Sparks flew, and the crystalline structure began to destabilize, its glow intensifying dangerously. Seeing her chance, Sarah activated a device she had brought along, a fail-safe, designed to overload the Nexus. "Get out of here!" she yelled to the others. "I'll hold it off!" Ethan hesitated, torn between staying to help and ensuring the mission succeeded. Finally, he nodded, grabbing Lily's arm and pulling her toward the exit. "Go!" he shouted to the rest of the team. "We'll meet you outside!" As they fled, explosions rocked the chamber behind them. Sarah stayed behind, her silhouette illuminated by the blinding light of the collapsing Nexus. She worked frantically, inputting commands to ensure the process completed. When the structure finally imploded, she smiled faintly, knowing she had done her part. Outside, Ethan, Lily, and the surviving rebels watched as the Nexus dissolved into nothingness, taking Lane and the remnants of the Council's control with it. Reality stabilized, the fractures sealing themselves as balance returned. Exhausted and battered, Ethan sank to his knees, relief washing over him. Lily knelt beside him, her voice barely audible. "Can you forgive me?" she asked, her eyes filled with regret. Ethan sighed deeply, his emotions a tangled mess. "I don't know," he admitted honestly, "but we'll figure it out, together." In the distance, the surviving ships drifted through space, searching for a new home. Though scarred by loss, Ethan found solace in knowing that humanity still had a chance to forge its own destiny. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it as survivors, resilient, hopeful, and unbreakable. The aftermath of the Nexus's destruction left the survivors adrift in more ways than one. The ships that had once been part of the Council's fleet now floated aimlessly through space, their alien crews either dead or incapacitated. Without the Council's control, the automated systems began to malfunction, leaving humanity to fend for itself. For Ethan Cole and the others who had fought so hard to reclaim their freedom, the victory felt bittersweet. They were free, but they were also lost. Ethan stood on the observation deck of what had become their makeshift flagship, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His body ached from the battle, and his mind was heavy with everything he'd witnessed. The faces of those who hadn't made it haunted him. Sarah Blake, who had sacrificed herself to destroy the Nexus. Marcus Lane, whose betrayal had nearly cost them everything, and countless others who had died fighting for a better future. He clenched his fists tightly, trying to push away the guilt and grief. They had won, but at such a steep price. Lily approached quietly, her footsteps soft against the metal floor. She hesitated before speaking, unsure if she even deserved to be near him after what she'd done. "How are you holding up?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. For days, they had avoided talking about what happened. The weight of her betrayal hung between them like an invisible wall. But now, standing here together, surrounded by the vast emptiness of space, it felt impossible to ignore any longer. "I don't know," Ethan admitted honestly. "I keep thinking about everyone we lost, and wondering if it was worth it." "It was," Lily said quickly, her tone firm despite the tears welling up in her eyes. "You gave us a chance, Ethan, a real chance, not just to survive, but to live on our own terms." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Yes, they had paid dearly for their freedom, but wasn't that exactly what they had been fighting for? To choose their own path, no matter how uncertain it might be? As if sensing the shift in his mood, Ava appeared beside them, clutching a tattered, stuffed animal she had carried since Earth. Her wide eyes scanned the starry horizon, full of curiosity rather than fear. "Where are we going, Daddy?" she asked innocently. Ethan knelt down to meet her gaze, forcing a small smile. "Somewhere new," he replied. "A place where we can start over." The task ahead wouldn't be easy. With no clear destination and limited resources, the survivors faced immense challenges. Food and water supplies were dwindling, and many of the ships were in poor condition, requiring constant repairs. Yet amidst the hardship, there was a sense of unity that hadn't existed before. People worked side by side, sharing skills and knowledge to keep the fleet operational. Old rivalries and divisions faded as everyone focused on a common goal, finding a new home. Rachel Grant played a key role in organizing the effort. Using data salvaged from the Nexus, she identified several potentially habitable planets within range of their current position. Each option came with risks, but staying put wasn't an option either. After much debate, the group decided to head toward a planet orbiting a pair of twin suns. A world bathed in golden light, its surface dotted with lush forests and sprawling plains. It wasn't perfect, but it offered hope. As the fleet set course for the new planet, life aboard the ships slowly began to stabilize. Ethan threw himself into helping wherever he could, whether it was repairing damaged equipment or assisting with ration distribution. Working kept his mind occupied, preventing him from dwelling too much on the past. Still, moments of quiet reflection often brought waves of emotion crashing back. He missed Sarah fiercely, her sharp wit and unwavering courage a constant presence during the darkest times. And though he tried not to dwell on it, he couldn't help but wonder if things might have turned out differently if she had survived. Lily, meanwhile, struggled to find her place among the survivors. Many viewed her with suspicion due to her earlier betrayal, and she understood why. Every glance, every whispered conversation felt like a judgment. But instead of retreating into herself, she resolved to make amends. She volunteered for the most difficult tasks, working tirelessly to prove her loyalty. Over time, people began to soften toward her, recognizing the sincerity of her efforts. One evening, as the fleet drew closer to the new planet, Ethan found himself sitting alone in the ship's mess hall. The room was mostly empty, save for a few stragglers finishing their meals. Rachel joined him unexpectedly, sliding into the seat across from him with a weary sigh. "You look like you've got the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders," she teased lightly. Though her own exhaustion was evident, Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe I do," he admitted. "Feels like it sometimes." Rachel studied him for a moment, her piercing gaze softening. "You did good, Ethan. Better than anyone could have expected. Don't forget that." Her words brought a lump to his throat. He nodded, grateful for her support. "Thanks, Rachel. I needed to hear that." The next day marked a turning point. As the fleet entered the new solar system, the golden glow of the twin suns illuminated the ships, casting warm light into every corner. The planet below was breathtaking, rolling hills covered in vibrant greenery, rivers sparkling like ribbons of silver, and skies painted in hues of orange and pink. It was a paradise compared to the desolation they had left behind. When the first landing party touched down, cheers erupted throughout the fleet. Tears streamed down faces as people stepped onto solid ground for the first time in months. Ethan carried Ava in his arms, letting her run barefoot through the soft grass. Lily walked beside him, her hand brushing against his tentatively. He didn't pull away. "This is it," Lily murmured, her voice filled with awe. "Our fresh start." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. They still had work to do, building shelters, planting crops, establishing a community, but for the first time in a long while, the future felt hopeful. In the weeks that followed, the survivors worked together to create a new settlement. They named it Haven, a tribute to the sanctuary they had found after so much loss. Fields were cleared, homes built from local materials, and communal spaces established to foster connection and cooperation. Slowly but surely, life began to take root. Ethan took on a leadership role, guiding decisions while ensuring everyone had a voice. He encouraged innovation and creativity, reminding people that this was their chance to build something truly unique. Under his guidance, Haven flourished, becoming a testament to resilience and determination. One afternoon, as Ethan stood atop a hill overlooking the growing settlement, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Behind him, Ava played with other children, laughter echoing through the air. Lily stood nearby, smiling faintly as she watched their daughter. Though the scars of their journey would always remain, they had found a way to heal, to move forward. "We did it," Lily said softly, joining him on the hill. "We actually did it." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Yeah," he replied, "and we'll keep doing it. Together." As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, bathing Haven in a warm, golden glow, Ethan allowed himself to believe in the promise of tomorrow. Humanity had endured unimaginable hardships, but it had also proven its strength. On this distant world, under skies unlike anything they had ever known, they had planted the seeds of a brighter future. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Cole believed that everything might just turn out okay. Life on Haven was far from perfect, but it was a start. The settlers worked tirelessly to build their new home, shaping the untamed wilderness into a thriving community. Every day brought new challenges, unpredictable weather patterns, unfamiliar wildlife, and the constant struggle to stretch limited resources. But there was also a sense of purpose that hadn't existed aboard the ships. For the first time in years, people woke up each morning with hope instead of fear. Ethan Cole had become the unofficial leader of Haven, though he never asked for the role. His calm demeanor and ability to listen made him a natural choice, and most were happy to follow his guidance. He spent his days overseeing construction projects, mediating disputes, and ensuring everyone had what they needed to survive. At night, he sat by the fire with Ava curled up beside him, teaching her about Earth's history while gazing at the twin suns setting over the horizon. It was a simple life, but it felt meaningful in a way nothing else ever had. Lily, too, found her footing in Haven. After months of proving herself through hard work and dedication, she earned the trust of the community. She took charge of organizing food distribution, using her organizational skills to make sure no one went hungry. Though some still harbored resentment toward her for her earlier betrayal, most chose to focus on the present rather than the past. Slowly, she began to rebuild her relationships, not just with Ethan, but with others as well. Despite the progress, tensions lingered beneath the surface. The scars of their journey were still fresh, and not everyone agreed on how Haven should be run. Some argued for strict rules and rigid hierarchies, believing structure was necessary to maintain order. Others advocated for freedom and flexibility, insisting that humanity's greatest strength lay in its adaptability. These debates often spilled into heated arguments, threatening the fragile unity that held the settlement together. One evening, during a town meeting held under the stars, the issue came to a head. A group of settlers proposed creating a council to govern Haven, similar to the interstellar council that had betrayed them. "We need leadership," one man declared passionately. "Without it, we'll fall apart." Ethan listened carefully, weighing the arguments on both sides. He understood the desire for stability, but he couldn't shake the memory of how easily centralized power could corrupt. When it was his turn to speak, he rose to his feet, his voice steady and clear. "I get why you think a council is a good idea," he began, "but we've seen what happens when a few people hold all the power. We left Earth because those in charge cared more about themselves than the rest of us. If we're going to build something better here, we have to do it differently. Everyone has to have a say, not just a select few." His words struck a chord with many, and after hours of discussion, the settlers reached a compromise. Instead of a formal council, they established rotating committees responsible for specific tasks like agriculture, defense, and education. Decisions would be made collectively, with input from every member of the community. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step toward ensuring that Haven remained a place where everyone had a voice. As weeks turned into months, the settlement continued to grow. Fields stretched further, dotted with crops that thrived in the rich soil. Homes became sturdier, built from stone and wood harvested sustainably from the surrounding forests. Children ran freely through the streets, laughing and playing without, the shadow of war or oppression looming over them. Even the wildlife seemed to adapt, with curious creatures occasionally venturing close enough to observe the humans who now called this planet home. But peace rarely lasts forever. One morning, a scout patrolling the outskirts of Haven returned with alarming news. Strange markings had been discovered carved into trees near the edge of the forest. Symbols unlike anything anyone had seen before. They weren't random. They formed patterns, almost like writing. The scout reported hearing faint noises coming, from deeper within the woods, though he hadn't dared to investigate further. The discovery sent ripples of unease through the settlement. Some dismissed it as the work of animals or natural phenomena, but others weren't so sure. Rachel Grant, who had taken on the role of Haven's de facto scientist, examined the symbols closely. Her brow furrowed as she traced the intricate lines with her fingers. "These aren't random," she said finally. "They're deliberate. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped Haven would be free of the dangers that had plagued Earth and the journey across space, but it seemed they weren't alone after all. Gathering a small team, including Daniel Hayes and Sarah Blake's younger brother Lucas, he set out to investigate. The forest was dense and alive with sound, the air thick with the scent of earth and leaves. As they ventured deeper, the markings grew more frequent, leading them along a winding path toward an unknown destination. The noises Rachel had described echoed faintly in the distance, clicks, whistles, and low hums that didn't belong to any animal they recognized. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive stone structure, ancient and covered in moss. More symbols adorned its surface, glowing faintly in the dim light filtering through the canopy above. Before anyone could react, figures emerged from the shadows, tall, slender beings with translucent skin and eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the beings stepped forward, raising a hand in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. Its mouth didn't move, but a voice filled their minds, calm and melodic. "You are not the first to come here," it said, "and you will not be the last." Ethan swallowed hard, gripping his weapon tightly. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the knot of fear in his stomach. "We are the Keepers," the being replied, "guardians of this world and its secrets. You have disrupted the balance, and now you must choose your path wisely." The weight of its words hung heavy in the air. Ethan exchanged glances with his companions, each of them processing the implications. Had their arrival somehow disturbed these beings, or was this planet hiding dangers even greater than they imagined? "We didn't mean to intrude," Ethan said carefully. "We're just trying to survive." The Keeper tilted its head, studying him intently. "Survival is not enough. To remain here, you must prove yourselves worthy. Otherwise, you will face consequences beyond your understanding." With that, the beings vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving Ethan and his team standing in stunned silence. The message was clear. Haven wasn't theirs by right. It had to be earned. Back at the settlement, Ethan shared what had happened. The news spread quickly, sparking a mix of fear and determination among the settlers. Some wanted to pack up and leave, searching for another planet where they wouldn't have to deal with mysterious guardians. Others argued that running away would solve nothing. They had come too far to give up now. In the end, the decision was unanimous. They would stay and face whatever challenges lay ahead. After everything they had endured, the betrayal of the Council, the loss of Earth, the fractures in reality, they refused to let fear dictate their future. Over the following weeks, the settlers worked harder than ever, fortifying Haven and preparing for whatever the Keepers might throw their way. Ethan led efforts to decode the symbols, hoping to understand the language of their new neighbors. Rachel conducted experiments, analyzing samples from the forest in search of clues. Lily organized training sessions, teaching people basic self-defense, techniques in case conflict became inevitable. Through it all, Ava remained a beacon of optimism. She explored the edges of the settlement with boundless curiosity, often bringing back strange plants or rocks for Rachel to examine. One day, she returned with a peculiar flower that glowed softly in the dark. When Rachel tested it, she discovered it emitted a frequency similar to the ones used by the Keepers. "This could be important," she said, excitement lighting up her face. "Maybe it's a sign or a gift." Ethan smiled faintly, watching Ava twirl around with the flower in her hand. Despite the uncertainty looming over them, moments like this reminded him why they had fought so hard to get here. Humanity wasn't defined by its mistakes or its failures. It was defined by its ability to adapt, to learn, and to hope. As the seasons changed and the twin suns cast their golden light over Haven, the settlers prepared for the next chapter of their story. Whatever challenges awaited them, they faced them together, with courage, resilience, and the unshakable belief that they could create something beautiful from the ashes of their past. And somewhere deep within the forest, the keepers watched, silently, waiting to see if humanity truly deserved a second chance.